it was slow at the beginning, and then once they kind of found that magic formula, it just absolutely took off. And the growth over the last 4 years has been, unicorn level. So we've been listed in the Inc. 500, which is, for UK listeners may not know it, it's the fastest growing companies in the US. So it's kind of like the gold standard measure of fast growing organizations. We actually had an unbelievable group of partners desperate for us to come, literally begging us to come. And I've never in my career seen anything like it, right?
Both you and Philip feel that distribution is broken.
You don't want to hear about the veneer of culture that goes on the careers page, Mark. Is that not the stuff you want? No? That we have a beer tap, but we treat people terribly. Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast.
Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Robert Belgrave and Phylip Morgan from Pax8 in the studio. How are we doing, guys?
Very well, thanks, Mark. Very well.
Good.
Yeah, doing great, thank you. I'm speaking to you from sunny Llandilo in Wales, and it's sunny for a change today.
Because I was actually going to say this, Phil, because we actually met at the Mentori event, didn't we? A couple of pre-COVID. So that was the last time I actually saw you. So obviously now the pandemic's happened, but we luckily get to meet over video today.
Yeah, you're dead right. And cool, that's a blast from the past, isn't it? But great talk you did that day as well. Learned a lot, mate.
Oh, thank you very much. So look, we'll go straight into it, guys. And I'm going to be honest with you. 25 years I've recruited in distribution, and I only heard of Pax8 about a year ago. And it was one of the guys internally said to me and said, "Have you heard of this distributor?" I was like, no. Apparently they're going to go from 80 to 350. I was like, no, never heard those guys. So I'm hoping, if I go to you, Robert, hopefully you can give the listeners a bit of an overview of Pax8 and how you've come to sort of land in the UK.
Yeah, sure. So, well, funnily enough, Mark, about a year and a half ago, I hadn't heard of Pax8 either. So I'm sure many people listening today have not heard of Pax8. So it'd be great to sort of share the story. So Pax8 is a business that was founded in Denver, Colorado. So, a North American business is kind of the heritage of the organization, and started about 8 or 9 years ago now, with a very clear vision for what the future of cloud software consumption would look like. They didn't really articulate it as distribution. Actually, other people describe us as a cloud distributor. We don't really think of ourselves in that way and never have. We sort of accepted the monkey along the way, but it wasn't really the vision and still isn't actually. The business was founded by a guy called John Street, who is our CEO of the business in the US. And he's in his 60s. This is his third very successful business. Started off in the sort of early internet era with USA.net, which was the first online email platform before Hotmail even turned up, right? And then built MX Logic, which got acquired by McAfee, and then subsequently Intel. So he sort of understands the market, and he spotted an opportunity to create what he felt would be the future of how businesses and the channel ultimately would buy, consume, deploy, deliver software, right? Which, as we know now, is largely cloud-driven and SaaS-based, and sort of saw that coming. So that's how the business started, and it was slow at the beginning, and then once they kind of found that magic formula, it just absolutely took off. And the growth over the last 4 years has been, unicorn level. So we've been listed in the Inc. 500, which is, for UK listeners may not know it, it's the fastest growing companies in the US. So it's kind of like the gold standard measure of fast growing organizations. Because it's done on trailing growth, it's a percentage measure. To do it multiple years in a row when you're growing quickly becomes very difficult, because obviously the percentage becomes harder on a bigger number. We just got listed for the 4th year in a row, which puts us in a very, very small group of, iconic US tech businesses, which demonstrates the success that we've had. And so the reason that you and I and others are now learning about Pax8 is because we launched in the UK this year. So in January of 2021, my business, Wirehive, was acquired by Pax8 to kind of begin the sort of expansion internationally of the company. And, what's the strategy? It's really replicating the amazing success we've had in North America. So we actually had an unbelievable group of partners desperate for us to come, literally begging us to come. And I've never in my career seen anything like it, right? There's this sort of cult following of what Pax8 is. And I think, we'll come on to this, I'm sure, but it sort of speaks, there are some very meaningful reasons why that is happening, right? There is a yearning in the market for something different. And Pax8, we think represents that, and certainly the feedback we get seems to support that. So what is Pax8? It's simply the best place for any organization, whether that's a channel partner like an MSP or the end user through that MSP, to buy, provision, deploy, consume SaaS software and cloud services.
Do you know what, Robert? I don't know any distributor. Maybe I'm being rude now. I don't know any distributor that's got a cult following of partners that's after them. So you're definitely in a small minority if that is the case. But because also as well, I saw in a recent article. On all seriousness, I saw in a recent article last year that both you and Phylip feel that distribution is broken. So can you explain to the listeners what you mean by this and what sort of Pax8 are trying to do to sort of fix it?
Yeah, I'll throw this to Phylip, but I just want to say we get misquoted on this sometimes a little bit. We've no axe to grind with the distributors in the channel, the broad lines, the traditional businesses. You all know who we mean. We're in a different lane, right? We're on a different journey as far as we see it, and there is some overlap there at the moment, but we don't see that as a long-term friction, right? So when we talk about, or rather when we get quoted as, distribution is broken, I suppose what we're really trying to say is we think there is a different way that is coming in terms of how businesses are going to rely on digital tools and services and the marketplaces and ecosystems that are going to help organizations consume them look totally different to how they have looked in the past, right? Phylip, how would you frame it? I know you very passionate about this one as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the phrase is correct, right? When we say distribution is broken, we're not saying that distributors are bad. We're saying that the platform that is being used to supply product, that's what distribution is, right? It's changed. So look, all the listeners or watchers today, how are they listening to my voice right now? This is not a DVD that they stuck in a player, or they haven't tuned into a radio, right? It's on a modern Spotify cloud service or watching on YouTube or however they're consuming this content. It's on a different platform. And for us, traditional distribution, which is why John and Klaus had the vision originally, as Rob alludes to, is not built for the complexities that come with cloud products. So for example, look, you and I, Mark, we go back some time. I think I'm the veteran on this podcast. I think being like 50 years ago.
Probably.
I think I'm the old guy, right? I remember brands like Computer 2000 and Micro Peripherals and all of that, right? That some of the listeners might know if they go back that time. But we used to order software on floppy disk and on DVDs that would come to us, and we would ship them and install disk one onto a server and disk one. Like, that world's gone because of the internet. So that's provided new problems in terms of provisioning, billing, support. And I think for us, we talk a lot, and Rob will talk in a moment with way more passion than me about what we call the wingman experience. Up and down the country and in every nation right now, there are MSPs and technology providers that are serving small businesses. They're the ones that are in the hot seat, right? They're the ones that's got an issue to fix today because something is broken, something needs changing, needs configuring. And so we talk about wingman, and wingman is basically the fact that we acknowledge that the MSP is in the driver's seat of the plane, so to speak, right? We're in the jump seat behind, and our job as co-pilot is to help them win at the task of what they're doing. So what we do is to bring amazing people, to bring support and enablement, as well as our platform, to actually help the MSP continue to grow their business as quickly as possible with all the technology solutions that they need in cloud services. And so that's what we mean. So we don't want to be a negative thing of distribution is broken, but clearly it's not working for us in the way that it has been and needs to evolve to the next level. Unless people want to go and sack off Netflix tomorrow and go back and say, please come back, right?
Would you, Robert mentioned it there, would you describe yourself as a distributor though? Or would you describe yourself as a technology solution provider? How would you describe your business?
Today, so John's vision is we are the world's favorite cloud marketplace for technology providers. So we're a cloud marketplace.
Cloud marketplace, okay. You've recently released the platform Rosello, so that promises to sort of change the way the channel community sell cloud services, etc. So can you, Robert, if I come to you with that one, maybe can you tell me a bit more about, the listeners more about that platform?
Yeah, so Rosello is a business we acquired in the Netherlands. So Rosello is not so much a product as a bolt-on business that we've acquired to give us a footprint into Europe. So Rosello is a business a little bit like Wirehive that was acquired to kind of launch in the UK, that we found that we felt fit our culture and had a great leadership team who wanted to stay on and be part of this vision that we've got to expand and offer Pax8 globally. And Rosello had an existing platform that they weren't happy with. Ultimately, they could see that it wasn't the long-term future, like it was doing a job for them, but they knew they needed something more. So we've been delighted to bring them into the Pax8 family, and we're in the process of moving all of their partners onto the Pax8 platform, which they're going to continue to use in the future. And that gives us a kind of footprint to establish our European presence, which is great because there's a huge opportunity in the channel in Europe. And if I would say that actually the problems that exist in the UK market are amplified in Europe because it's a bit more fragmented. So yeah, there's an amazing opportunity there. We're already having some great success. So yeah, apologies if that was a little confusing in terms of the platform play. I think that's because Rosello had a platform previously, but
right.
Yeah, it's part of our international expansion.
And talking of international expansion, Philip, I believe that's a big part of your remit, driving the sort of international expansion of Pax8. Where do you see the main opportunities? Is it Europe or is it outside of that?
Yeah, so I think virtualization and globalization are driving lots of things at this moment in time, right? So we are in a post-pandemic world, and everybody is still trying to find their balance after having a punch in the head a little bit, so we're all a bit, kind of having a bit of a wobble, trying to find our feet again and move forward. But one thing we do know is globalization is happening at a bigger rate, particularly here in the UK, as like a lot of the Brexit choices that we've made as a nation have forced people to look to trade in the Far East, etc. So, a lot of the MSPs, lots of really good MSPs that I talk to on a daily basis in the UK are serving people in like Dubai and in Houston and Singapore, with lots of smaller companies that are exploiting the new global marketplace that's at their disposal. So part of it's nearly a justice thing, isn't it, Rob, for us in the way that we are bringing globalization, of Pax8 to MSPs. Back to lots of people saying, will you please come here? And right now we've got lots of MSPs all over the world that are saying, can you come to our territory? Can you come here? We're talking to other people that say you can do this, this, and this, and to put more time back in our calendar and to put more cash in our pocket. You're transformative in the way that you're helping us build our business. So for us, it was easier because, Guten Morgen and Bonjour, comment ça va is probably the extent of my language skills. So we decided to partner with a professional. So as the drive of globalization is happening, Pax8 will continue to see companies that align with our goal of transforming digital globally, and doing that in a local way with great support, great enablement in the language of choice for the customer.
One thing we talked about when we were offline was about culture and companies making decisions around office cultures, returning to office, hybrid working, fully in the office, etc., etc., etc. Now, I've heard that, and you've mentioned it, and Robert mentioned it just as when he was speaking about Rosello, that culture is an important part of Pax8. Now, don't take me wrong, guys, but when I hear about culture, normally I hear about we've got a ping pong table, we've got a snooker table, and we're a family, and we take everyone out for a beer after work on a Friday, etc., etc., etc. And it's not quite the culture that people want. So tell me, Robert, the listeners, why the culture is so important at Pax8 and what is so special about it.
Sure.
And don't tell me about ping pong tables, for God's sake.
Well, you don't want to hear about the veneer of culture that goes on the careers page, Mark. Is that not the stuff you want? No, that we have a beer tap, but we treat people terribly. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Yeah. Look, I think lots of businesses over the last decade have sort of heard the conventional wisdom about why culture matters, but don't actually really understand what it is, right? So you get this sort of like weird artificial culture thing that happens, and it's not really anything at all, actually, which is it's paper thin and doesn't really create any meaningful value for people that work in those organizations. And I think that's it's good that people are starting to realize it matters. It's bad because it makes it harder to differentiate for candidates, or for people looking at where they might choose to find employment and build a life and a career, right? Because until you get in, it's actually quite hard now to figure out, well, what is it, right? And so what is it for us, to your question? For us, it's about servant leadership, right? It's about a leadership team that is here to support our people, not dictate to them, right? It's about creating an environment where people can do their best work. And that is great colleagues. It's a great environment that is, designed with care and attention to the details that make an environment a lovely place to be. It's learning and development, right? It's giving people the opportunity to master something and to progress their skill set. Like, I'm sure many people listening to this, and you, Mark, are familiar with the work about what motivates us, the stuff that Dan Pink's done with Drive and all the Carnegie Mellon studies and all that stuff. And it's that classic autonomy, mastery, purpose, really. Give people the autonomy to direct the work that they do and support them to do it. Don't dictate to them how to, which is kind of the servant leadership thing. Mastery, amazing learning and development opportunities, the opportunity to grow within a business, to move around between different teams, not to be kind of letterboxed in and pigeonholed. And purpose, right? Believe in the purpose of the business and what it's trying to achieve. And that is, our kind of top line vision about this amazing journey that we're on to change the way businesses all over the world consume software and do more with less and all that great stuff. But also the other side of the purpose motive is things like community engagement that we do, diversity initiatives that are not a marketing exercise, but are actually meaningful, right? In terms of trying to build an amazing team that supports people from all backgrounds, races, genders, ages, neurodiversity, getting involved in the local community in the areas that we have offices. We've got an amazing program in the US at the moment, building rural offices in sort of underserved areas, because one of the things the pandemic did was give us the freedom to try that. And so we decided, well, let's do it. Let's start setting up some small offices in small US towns that don't have any tech businesses and kind of take jobs back to those places. And, it's the sort of sum total of all of that stuff. And so what is culture? I think culture is the sum total of everything that a business does. It's not ping pong. It's not beer. It's like, what does it feel like emotionally to be part of a business? And, for me, this was the mold within which I had built Wirehive before we were acquired. And we weren't for sale, Mark. We got introduced to Pax8, and I couldn't believe how amazing the business was in terms of its growth, sure, but also the culture side, like how much they cared for their team and their people. I think, in the UK, we have this sort of stereotypical view of US tech businesses that are venture funded, 100-hour weeks, ruthless culture, very sales driven. It's none of those things, right? Of course we have high expectations and we're driven and we need to achieve our goals and aspirations, but actually there's a different way of doing that. And we talked earlier on about that kind of cult following. you don't get a cult following by having a great technical product, right? You get a cult following by having an amazing team who support your customers in a way that they love and they're delighted by. And that comes from culture. If you get culture right, if your people are happy and well looked after, everything else will sort of fall into place alongside. So for me, that is why culture is so important. It's not like talent acquisition, attraction, and then actually just get on with it, sit at your desk. It's something that has to flow through everything a business does. And it's been such a joy to see a US-led company achieve this, because it's something that is very, very rare for a business that's growing this quickly. And now, as we spread out internationally, to be able to kind of bring that to new territories and not sacrifice it along the way, in that kind of hunt for continued revenue growth is great. And so Phylip and I are loving doing it in the UK, and we will come to recruitment and how we've managed to hire all these people. But this is part of it, right? It's about that legitimate employer brand, that it speaks for itself, because anybody that speaks to anybody at Pax8 can just see straight away that there's something special here, right? Which we've got something different that actually has some depth to it.
Yeah, I love that answer. One comment you made very early on in that was, and I almost come to Phylip with it because I think it's quite interesting, is it really hard to understand the culture until you work there? Because you're right, servant leadership, empowering employees, it's fantastic, and it sounded great, and I thought, you know what, it does sound amazing. Do you think it's quite difficult, unless you're actually in the building, to actually get a vibe of that? Because there's lots of companies talking about how, I won't go back to the ping pong tables and the beer taps, but lots of people are saying how wonderful their companies are and how great it is. But sometimes, until you actually get into the culture, you actually don't really know what you're getting into, do you? So, Phil, what do you think about that? Is it difficult to understand a culture until you're in it?
Oh, absolutely. Look, everything's got a culture. Families have got a culture, right? So if you want to know what the culture of my family is, you can look at Instagram and Facebook and, look at the Morgan's YouTube video or whatever it is. But the bottom line is, if you want to really know what our family culture is like, come on holiday with the Morgan family, right? Because that's where you're going to be close in our world. See how impatient I am and see everything, right? So unless you're really in the ecosystem, you don't really know. So I think one of the challenges for you in your role in recruitment, right, is lots of people trap people with the ping pong table and the beer on tap and everything else, and they come to work for that company and they realize, actually, when you talk about like integrity and honesty and trust and everything, and let's not forget, that integrity was one of the values of Enron, which, was one of the biggest corporate frauds in history, right? So back to Rob's point earlier with servant leadership, this stuff has to be lived. People have got to feel it, not see it or read it. It's got to be felt. So, when we say to our partners, we say to anybody that wants to kind of connect with us, and we would say to anybody right now that, wants to join Pax8 or maybe interested in becoming either a partner or joining our team, reach out to me or Rob, send us a LinkedIn right now. We'd love to know more. I'd love to have a coffee or a beer with you, find out what are you looking for? Where are you in tech? How can we help you develop your career and what you're doing? Because fundamentally, I think this thing called culture is ethereal. I like to break it down to vision and values, right? So the vision of the company is really important because somebody's got to connect with that, right? So the vision of transforming digital as we are doing and helping MSPs win and the whole wingman experience, people have got to get that, or they're probably not going to be happy working at Pax8, right? So that's the vision, but the values piece is how we behave and treat one another as we fulfill the vision. And that's the most important stuff. So, people can go and hit Glassdoor now and they can see John Street, our CEO, that Rob and I've got a great working relationship. I could pick up the phone to him right now. Hey, could you spare me 10 minutes today? And he'd say, yep, I'll fit you in. Here it is. That's why he scores like 97% on CEO ratings on Glassdoor, because he lives this stuff. And it cascades down the organization that we really behave. Like integrity at Pax8 is not something that's on the wall. It's something that's in people's hearts in the way that we live it.
Absolutely. Now, as a recruiter, obviously, I was very interested in hearing about the UK boost in headcount, because it said you probably go from 80 to 350 over the next 2 years. So with this in mind, I thought that we'd have a few recruitment questions because part of this series is the recovery series, and not only will it help you guys recruit, but I'm also want to help the wider community in the IT channel get back into work. So I'm going to go straight into it. When interviewing, Robert, how would a candidate really try and impress you? And have you got an example of that?
I think the thing that is always impressive in any interview is that somebody has taken the time to really actually understand what the business they're applying to does, which seems
that's the basics.
seems really obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think because in technology, often actually people don't quite get it, right? And the amount of times, I suppose I'm jaded by the amount of times over my career I've sort of said, so what do you think we do? And tell me a bit about us, right? And you can always, with that question, immediately tell how much somebody cares about the job, really. Sure, you get a read on aptitude and other stuff too, but basically, did they bother, right, to actually go and not just have a quick flick through the website, but actually go and look at what that business does and how they do it. And the best candidates will tell you your own stories, right? They'll say, oh, well, you guys do this and that. And I saw this great case study with this brand who did this, and the customer said they really liked that about it. And for me, that's the kind of, it just shows a level of care and attention and aptitude in somebody that they cared enough to look, right? They had the intellect to digest it all and they had they were able to retain the key information and kind of play it back to you in a positive way. I always think that's a great sort of indicator.
Yeah, I always say to candidates that it is. I see that as the basics really, but I always say to the candidates, you've got to interview Robert or Phil yourself. You've actually got to get 5 bespoke questions that you found from your own research. Them about whether that's about their LinkedIn or about the company or about the products or the case studies. But if you haven't done the basics, if you haven't got 5 bespoke questions that you can interview them with from your research, wouldn't even bother turning up, which is a shame. What about you, Phil? What I would say, what's your favorite interview question? If you've got a favorite interview question you'd like to ask or be asked?
Yeah, so my favorite interview question is actually and I've been chastised for a few times that I do it because they say, whoa, you're going to the personal zone, very, very quickly on some of it. But I think it's really important that we have authenticity in what we do, right? So my favorite question, I'll ask it of you now, Mark. What's the biggest cock up that's ever happened to you at work? And what did you do to fix it? Right? Because mine was I deleted 6 months of a client's data. Right, I'm the guy that hit delete, no backup. It was gone. So, what's your biggest cock up?
Do you know what? My biggest cock up happened in COVID, whereas I didn't have any disaster recovery at all. So, when it was work from home, I had one laptop in the building. We couldn't work from home. It was just impossible. I had everything on prem. I had one laptop. We couldn't get hold of laptops, so I had for about 2 weeks, I had 15 people at home that couldn't work at all, couldn't even log on. So that was an absolute disaster. And of course, looking in hindsight now, everyone's got laptops now. But do you know what? I learned a hard lesson there that, agile IT, that Robertson and Sumner, we weren't that agile. We weren't agile at all. So that was a big lesson to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's my question.
I want this to both of you, actually, because I like hearing stories like this. Because what's the funniest thing that's happened to you, either as a candidate or a hiring manager during an interview? I'll start with you, Robert. What's the funny story you've got?
I'll tell a sort of proxy story. So a guy who I've done some work with over the years as a sort of executive coach who has built a couple of great tech businesses has. Used to do a thing in interviews for salespeople where he would give them a pack of colored pencils and a piece of paper and say, draw me a picture, right? That was it.
That's it.
That was it. And people would look at him like, what? The terror that goes through somebody, right? In that moment in an interview, is this a trick? What's good? What's bad? And he'd say, just draw me a picture, whatever. And his view was actually, it was a great test because, you're putting someone in a slightly uncomfortable position, but you're not asking them to do anything unreasonable. Just draw me a picture, right? Like draw a picture of the sun and a flower, draw a picture of your kids, draw a picture of a football, like whatever, whatever. And he said that normally people would draw some terrible thing because nobody can really draw, right? And every once in a while you get someone who did art at school and would draw you like a Monet or whatever, but most of the time you get like a crappy stick figure drawing of something about their life, which would then give you something to talk about. And he thought it was just a really interesting way of challenging people. It was for sales roles typically, like to just see how they deal with something uncomfortable. But he did once have someone tell him to F off and walk straight out. So
yeah, I'll be thinking weirdo alert.
I was said, "Are you joking?" And stormed out. Right. So there you go. There's a funny interview story for a slightly off-piste interview technique.
What about Phil? You've got to be able to top that. It's just this isn't placeholder stories. Come on, what? Look, drawing on with coloured crayons. You got to have a better story than that, Phil.
Yeah, so I'm going to go for the third-party story, seeing as something. So I was going to pick that, but it's very, very, very similar. That one has happened to me. Is we had a company. I won't name the company because it would be unfair. But it was part of sales corporate policy and hiring salesperson. Because if people can sell, they can sell anything. And the Wolf of Wall Street, sell me this pen.
Yeah,
that was part of it. And we had somebody that said F off and just like walk out the room, like what, But that was one that happened to me, which was quite amusing, but that was maybe a rather crooked corporate policy. But the funniest one that I've ever heard is, first and second interview, and there's a sheet of paper, and on the back of the sheet of paper, this first interviewer's notes. And so a friend of mine was doing the interview, and somebody else had done the first interview, and turning over, he had written in big letters on the back of the interview note, which was, "If you don't hire this person, you're fired!" Exclamation mark. And so while he's doing the second interview, he is literally holding up the piece of paper like this, as I'm doing on the camera right now, reading the notes. And this candidate is smiling, during the whole of the interview, which he's going all the way through. And as he goes through, he hasn't realized that when he turns it over, that all the time that person who's been interviewed, they were reading the text on the back that said, "If you don't hire this person, you're fired." So that's quite an amusing story.
That's brilliant. Robert, you alluded to earlier about diversity in hiring, and I was wondering sort of what initiatives you've got in place with when you're actually recruiting at the scale you are. We talked off camera about it's hard to recruit at the moment. Time to hires are a bit lagging, but you still want to get, while you're trying to fuel growth, you want to get the right people in, but also you do want a diverse workforce. So have you got any sort of initiatives that you've got in place that's helping you accelerate growth as well?
Yeah. So on the sort of D&I stuff, it's become a kind of hot button topic, right? And it's something, something that, again, almost like the ping pong table example, like everybody's now saying they do in various, various degrees. So, again, like culture, you have to look a bit deeper, I think, to find the reality. For us, it is something that we consider to be of paramount importance, not because it's the right thing to do, although it obviously is, but because it helps you build a fantastic organization, right? Like all the data proves indisputably that diverse organizations are more successful, they have happier people, they make more profit, right? Like, so you don't even need to get into the kind of ethical debate about D&I to know that it's the right thing to do. And then, of course, if you go to the ethical debate, well, then there's all the other stuff about why you should be doing it and stuff like that. So I'm very pleased that the board, our investors, our C-suite, all of the leadership of Pax8 sees this the same way and wants to try and change the balance, because like a lot of tech businesses, we're very white. We're pretty male. We're not too bad on gender. On age, we're quite young, right? Which is quite common. And I think age is one of the often overlooked areas of diversity.
Yeah.
And it's particularly in young tech businesses. God, having some older people around is so useful. The perspective and experience people with a few more years under their belts offers can be game changing, and I think so. So what are we doing about it? We have, we have full-time resource who are dedicated to it. We have a number of people in our VP and SVP layer whose jobs are to drive this initiative forward. We do these D&I reports on the business quarterly, which are really beautifully produced, which talk about the trends and where our successes have been and where areas for improvement are and things like that. Through the talent process, I guess, which is kind of where this is being framed, we're using some of the modern tools and systems to, do things like anonymize the candidate, so that to get rid of unconscious bias and things like that, but also trying to use these different tools to try and reach into different talent pools. Because often I think the problem with diversity is people say we want to be more diverse and then cast the line into the same pond, which is full of white men, and then go, well, we can't find any candidates. It's like, well, because you're looking in the wrong place, guys. So that's an area that the team, particularly in the last 12 months, have been really focused on. And I think this is one of the great silver linings of COVID, is because it's pushed people into this hybrid working, remote working world, and people have come to terms with the fact that, it can work, right? Maybe we can actually have remote teams or people that work in more distant locations. It's enabled people to look in those different areas where they might not previously have looked, where that more diverse talent exists, and we're certainly seeing some good early results in our kind of outreach into those new talent pools as well. So there's no one thing, right? It's like the culture of our debate. It's kind of lots of little things and the sum total of them, but we really want to be seen as a leader in the space.
Absolutely. So I'll come to you with this, Phil, because there'll be lots of people out there applying for roles, sending their CVs off, etc., trying to get in front of yourself or Robert. Now, as a hiring manager or hiring managers, how do you decide who to interview? Because you must be getting CVs all the time, or your talent team is going to be getting CVs all the time. How do you decide to actually which CVs to look at and which CVs to reject?
Yeah, so I think, can I cover something first before I dive into that question? I think on this issue of diversity, right, people have got to approach it with the right attitude to it, right? So the attitude that we've got, because it's baked into our culture, right? Because we're transformers, we're here to transform distribution and cloud for people, right? So in the same way, we approach diversity as not something to be complied with, which is, oh, look, we're too white and I've got these diversity issues, let's comply. Our board and the ethos of our business is we're here to deliver transformation in that area. We're here to be positive change. So for us at the top level, driving candidates into us is the fact that we are winning women in industry awards. We're winning diversity awards, and the only reason we can do that is that we do what it says on the tin, right? So before all of the candidates even consider applying and sending the CV in for us, we've got to create that diversity shower, if I can call it, right? That is actually setting us up as a place that people feel, whether, regardless of their race, gender, disability, age, all of the stuff that encompasses that they feel that they can apply to Pax8 in the first place, right? And that would be welcomed, and that they would, irrespective of, they might be in a wheelchair, or they might have sight issues, or whatever, or they have a particular religious view that they want to outwork their working life in this way, that they feel that they comply. And if you're one of those people listening to us right now, please apply, because this can be your home too, because it's that kind of home for me, right? Because I'm a diverse, creative thinking Welshman. That's how I am. And I found Pax8 to be my home too. And I want to create that home for others. So then when it comes to the actual CV piece, for me to answer your question, we've got a great talent team here in the UK and the US that treat every single CV with utmost importance. Anybody applying will get feedback from us, no matter how successful or unsuccessful. But, we use several tools and, stuff that I could go into more detail with you if you wanted to know. But look, to several tools and platforms to attract candidates, and then track and cater in a robust way to make sure that those job seekers are fulfilled in a way that we can achieve our objectives, as Rob said, in line with our diversity policy that somebody owns as part of what they do here. Someone owns this issue inside our business and has measurable metrics that we want to deliver.
Great. Once they've joined Pax8, what advice would you give to an ambitious person who's looking to progress up the career in the organization? Because obviously you're fast growing, there's going to be lots of opportunities. How do they get recognized though? You know, Robert, if I come to you with that.
Yeah, sure. I think ultimately just be curious, explore the business, speak to people. You know, I think in fast growing tech businesses, everybody's busy, right? The one thing everybody has in common is they're busy. And so you have to, often the thing to do is to seek out those relationships. You know, in my career, I've always found if you speak, well, at least if you're working in the right business, which fortunately I always did before setting up, you know, and being in charge of them. If you ask somebody for help, they'll be more than happy to give it to you, but they probably won't realize you need it unless you ask. So, you know, my advice to anyone joining our team is, you know, explore the business, speak to people in different departments, send messages to people spontaneously, try and find a mentor if you think you can identify one, you know, ideally in a leadership role, and really, you know, spend some time with people in the different divisions and different parts of the company that you may not have much contact with, right? And again, this all comes back to culture, because in our business, the culture is such that if anybody anywhere in the world sends you a message on Teams or Slack or emails you or whatever and says, hey, can we have half an hour to chat about nothing in particular, the response is going to be, of course, I'd love to. Let's do that, right? And kind of go from there. So I think that curiosity is such an important trait. The one other thing I always say to people when they join the business is, well, you're new, take a little black book or have a little Google notepad or whatever, and for the first 6 months, write down all the stupid stuff that we do, because after 6 months, you'll stop seeing it, right? And so I think that's one of the things you can always do when you're new into any business, which is so useful and is a great talking point then to go and have those conversations with other people, right? And particularly with kind of mentor-mentee relationship, is just note down all the stuff you see a business that does that you think, I'm not sure that's the best way to do that, actually. Because people become institutionalized so quickly. So yeah, that's the kind of framing for new candidates as they come in for me. Would you add anything, Phil?
Yeah, what I would add as well, the phrase that I use, and I pinch this off the writer Bob Berg that wrote a book called The Go-Giver. I don't know if you've read it, Mark. It's a fantastic little book. Is that, you know, the phrase that he uses in the book, he says, like, profit is an echo. Okay, so profit is something that is given to you in exchange for something you do. And I think a lot of people focus on profit, right? They focus on the end game rather than the service of what they're delivering that's going to generate that profit, right? So, for example, in a recruitment business, you find the right candidate that matches it, and the candidate is happy and the employer is happy. Well, if you can achieve that, that's like utopia, Mark, right? You know, someone's going to come back to you next year and says, can you find me another one? Can you find me another? And before we know it, as we do know, Marc Sumner is one of the best recruitment companies in the channel here in UK, because you add value, right? There's value in this podcast. You haven't got to do this today. You could be doing a pile of other things, but because in your heart, what you want to do is add value, you're a go-giver, right? And I think for someone in their career as well is, you know, be a go-giver, add value to your colleagues, help them win. Our value of elevate each other. That's what we call it with a number 8. Elevate each other here at Pax8. So, you know, set one another up for a win. You know, you see someone that's in trouble, help them. Set our partners up for a win. So, you know, we can talk about servant leadership, or we can actually live out servant leadership. And that's the big part of our culture as well, is, you know, if you're ambitious, serve people, serve everyone that you see around you in what you're doing. That's a big part of our culture.
Love that answer. Really, really good answer. Really love that. My last couple of questions, guys. I'm a diverse candidate. I think Pax8's great. I want to be part of the team. I apply, but maybe I've been a bit of a job hopper. Maybe I've hopped around a bit, and my CV hasn't got past your talent acquisition team. What advice would you give for people that have had maybe a number of short stints, the job hoppers out there in the world who need to get jobs. They can't just stand unemployed, guys. They got to get jobs. So if they want to get jobs, what advice would you give them to sort of get past that talent acquisition team and get in front of the likes of you, or explain why they've done it?
I think just be honest. Just be, it's a short answer for me. Like, just be honest about your situation. I think great talent teams are like you just described, are sympathetic to the lives people live and the things that happen. If someone ultimately, it's about who the person is. So, I mean, it's a great covering letter scenario, isn't it? I think often if you have a slightly unusual CV, the covering letter is really important because you can kind of articulate that little bit more that perhaps you don't feel comfortable putting out in the long form of the CV. But however you do it, make sure you get across to the talent team what your story is. Even if that story is, I was lost in life for 10 years. I didn't know what to do. I had a mental health problem. Someone died, like whatever it is, warts and all. Just be honest with people, because if you don't, they'll know there's something not right there. And that, I think, my view is, I think there's a lot of theatre in recruitment, both sides, right? People are kind of presenting themselves to be something they're not quite often, and equally companies often are trying to pretend it's the best place in the world to work, and the reality is it's just probably quite a good place to work, right? And I personally think a bit more sincerity on both sides goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. There is a bit of presenting the best light on both sides, and sometimes a bit of raw honesty, warts and all. How I like it when companies tell me, it's great telling me all the great stuff. Tell me what's not good about, what's not good about working for Pax8, what's not good about working for Joe Blogg's company, because I think that raw honesty at the start saves a lot of time down the road, because after time, once they get into the company anyway, past probation, or if they're trying to pass probation, they suddenly work out what the real nuts and bolts of the firm are. My last question, and I'd like you sort of both to answer it if you can. What do you think the factors are people ought to consider when weighing up which part of the tech industry they work in? And what I mean by that is, again, don't take this the wrong way, guys, but when people talk about working in distribution, they normally talk about it's a great starting place. I hear a lot of people talking about maybe it's not for my career. I want to work in for a vendor. I want to work at the top of the channel, etc. Or some people say to me, I want to work in a sexier part of the market, whether it's security or mobility or whatever it is. When people's actually looking for a new career in the sector, what do you think they should weigh up? Should it be the technology, the culture, the environment? What should they think about? Phil, come to you first. You're laughing, Phil. Now
yeah. So the reason I'm laughing, right, is I'm the ultimate misfit, right? I didn't fit in at school. I got no qualifications. I was always really, really good with people. I was always interested in gadgets and gizmos and everything else, like a big techie. But like the reason I started my own company in 1989 is because I couldn't get a job, right? so that was the problem, right? And I think most people, right, even like people that are candidates for university, they're like, what could, we push people into A levels that they've got to take, and they go, I don't know, what shall I do? I'm good at sciences, and they fall into this, they fall into that. And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but it's somewhere in the region of 80% of salespeople, they use that phrase, I fell into sales. And then they discover a path of their people skills, and they're really good at influencing and solution providing and everything. So part of the big thing with us at Pax8 is, look, just be in our world, elevation and career progression. Every single all hands that we have here, we're doing elevations where somebody has moved to a different division, and we've put a square peg in a rounder hole, maybe, and then we're trying to move that place around. Because to be honest, like, did Rob, that's on the call here with me, ever set out to be CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world? Pretty sure that was a no. He fell into this, right? And the only reason he's able to do that is to try things, experience things, and get there. And so I would say a lot of the time with people, when they want to get started in the tech industry, start somewhere. And if you start somewhere, start with something that you think that you like. And if you don't like it, start having conversations, say, oh, well, I'd like to do that. I see what Charlie's doing over there. I'd like to do what he's doing. Because I think the biggest thing about the experiences that we have is that they help us realize what we don't like. And I think sometimes that's more important, knowing, because I'm not a detail person, right? I'm highly creative. You know, I know what I'm really good at, and I play to the 3 skills, as my board know. I keep my lane to the 3 things I'm really good at, and they empower me to do that. But details, they just keep that away from me. They build a team around me and say, right, Phil, get them to do it, right? Because they allow me, or back to Rob's point at the beginning, creating an environment that allows Phil to do his best work. Yeah. So I do think in tech, it's a massive, booming industry. You know, Apple's the #1 tech company in the world, and just look at the FTSE 100 or the New York Stock Exchange. You know, you ain't got the old industrial banks and BP and all of those kind of companies on there. They're all tech companies, and the future of the majority of the world is going to be tech. So we're going to have more tech jobs, and the plethora of areas in tech, cybersecurity, continuity, cloud services, like it's massive, massive playground that people can get involved in and fundamentally find a job that they love. And so I would say, in summary, start somewhere, and more importantly, start with a right company that values you for who you are and the skills that you have.
Great. So Robert, you know, if you can sort of end the show, how we can add to Phil's comments, what should people weigh up when they're considering tech coming into the market?
Yeah, look, it's a subject that's probably close to my heart as well. I think I love technology, always knew it was the career path for me, but didn't quite know where or how it would end up. Thought I was going to be an engineer, started off down that track, really enjoyed it, then realized, I understand technology and I can talk to people. That seems to be slightly less usual than people who could do one or the other. And so I kind of moved more into that direction, and you know, I ultimately ended up in a kind of leadership role of a technology company, and loved it, and then kind of grew my own business, and here we are. I think in my opinion, there is no longer, you know, every business is now a technology company, like, you know, in some shape or form. And obviously so really the question then becomes, is there an area you're really excited by? Because I think if you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life, as the cliche goes. But it is true. Like, if you really are passionate about the subject matter that you're working in, I think you'll find the work much more enjoyable. And if you're enjoying the work, you will go further in it. So you know what? If you love security and you think it's fascinating, go and work in a cybersecurity company, right? But I think broadly, actually, when people work in tech, inverted commas, what they're actually doing is sales or project management or finance, or all the same stuff every business has always done, because, you know, tech businesses are just businesses after all. The product is some sort of technology, but it's a business with all the same needs and responsibilities. So it's the other stuff that's more important. It's about the culture of the organization. It's about opportunity to grow. You know, does that employer offer you a long-term career path? Will they support you? And you know, to your comment, Mark, about, you know, distribution was sort of seen as the entry level for years in tech, and then people would want to be at a vendor or in a hotter area. Well, let's just unpack that. Why is that? Well, people like the idea of the top tier vendors because the perception is they pay more, the culture's good, there's more opportunity, right? People go and work for Microsoft because they can have a 25-year career there, right? And that's quite compelling. You know, Pax8 is the sort of business that offers all of that to people. And so I think, you know, don't judge a book by its cover. Take the time to go and really understand what the individual business you might be applying to can offer you. The questions you should be asking are like, could you give me an example of somebody who joined the business at a junior level and now holds a senior role? That's always a great signal. Our Chief Revenue Officer at Pax8 right now, globally, Nick Heddy, amazing guy, credible talent, joined as junior salesperson, right? And I just think, and in 8 years, he's gone from the very bottom to the very top of our sales organization by delivering, learning, proving it, right, along the way. And we've got so many stories like that in Pax8. And really, the reason that's the killer question is it tells you 2 things. It tells you, is the business actually growing? Because if a business is growing quickly, there's always opportunity for progress, expansion, and for people to move around. And, you know, is this sort of organization that will train me and teach me and give me the opportunity to grow? Because in a traditional enterprise business, that's just never going to happen, right? The speed is too slow. There's too much inhibition. There's that kind of culture of very risk adverse, right? They'd always rather bring in that experienced person with all, that's done it for 20 years. So yeah, don't pigeonhole yourself into a specific area of technology. Look under the cover, look at the real heart of the business you're applying to. And remember that ultimately all businesses are tech businesses, right? So it's about the other stuff, I think, that's more important.
Guys, Phil, Robert, you've been great guests. Thanks so much for your time.